I think it's important for us to not feel like we're siloed. The internet's an interesting place because you can feel connected, but also feel so damn lonely at the same time. So it's also like putting a mirror up to community to be like, yo, you're not the only one.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Off the Cuff, where conversations lead to inspiration. I'm your host, Christian Palmer, and today I'm joined by someone whose work has been featured on tons of publications, such as The Daily News, HuffPost, Latina Magazine, and BuzzFeed, just to name a few. You may know her from her YouTube series, The Cat Call, where she debunks the taboos and the misconceptions of the Latinx community. She's a director, producer, content creator, and the host of Spotify's morning show, The Get Up. Without further ado, here's Off the Cuff with Kat Lazo. Kat.
You are so good at your job.
Oh,
where was the script that was all memorized? That was
memorized.
so amazing. Shout out to you. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank
oh my
you.
goodness.
This place is comfy.
You look comfortable. You look great.
I am.
It's great to have you on the opposite side of the table, right? You're usually the one interviewing the guests and, unwinding those stories, but it's great to have you on the opposite side of the table to learn a little bit more of your story. So I kind of want to just tap into it, from the foundational periods of like kind of where you grew up, born and raised in Queens.
That's right.
Shout out to Queens, and we're family that migrated from South America. I'm curious to know a little bit more about your upbringings and some of the things that occurred in your life growing up that shaped who you are today.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm from Queens. It's always really funny when people have a lot of Queens pride. I feel like I don't really have a lot of Queens pride. I do love my borough, but I think I had a different experience, because I grew up, like many of my identities, literally, I physically grew up on the border of, I'm not going to give like my zip code away because I still live there. But where I grew up was kind of like on the border of a very like white neighborhood and then a very Latino immigrant migrant community. So, there were a lot of moments where I felt othered by people, by the white people in particular, where my family had a house in. And then I felt like when I would go to my grandma's and she lived on the side that was more like immigrant Latino, it was like, oh, who's this white girl? So it's like I never felt like I fit in. So it was kind of a struggle. So I think I have maybe some like trauma around Queens where I was like, damn, I never fit in. But yeah, like you said, my parents, my father's from Peru, specifically Lima, and my mom's from Bogota, Colombia. And both of those places are not Mexico. I know a lot of people like to confuse them because I heard that a lot growing up where it's like, oh, so you're Mexican. I'm like, no, I'm not Mexican. And for a long time, like my family was the only non-Anglo white people on the block, So I think that also influenced me a lot. Like I think when I was younger, I kind of had at a young age, I had a better understanding of the ways in which my family and myself experience these like microaggressions based on things like accent, based on language, based on, where my family originated from. And that obviously informs a lot of who I am today. Yeah.
That's amazing, Kat. And I appreciate you sharing that because it kind of winds a good picture there. And you talked about fitting in and not being able to fit in. At what point did you feel like you started to fit in? And at what point did you embrace your identity and culture?
Wow. At what point did I feel like I finally fit in? I mean, I feel like the internet had a lot to do with me finally feeling like myself. I don't think I ever felt like I fit in Queens or in my community, in my borough. I think the internet kind of gave me an escape to work out a lot of like the internal complications that I was having around my own identities. So I would say probably I turned to YouTube like in college. My last year of college is when I started making YouTube videos, and that was just like an escape for me. Let me make some satirical, comedic videos around gender, around race, but specifically from like a Latina millennial's perspective.
Right. And what triggered that? Like, where did the idea or the mindset come from to talk about some of these topics in the last year of like college?
So I had gone to FIT, Fashion
Mhm.
Institute of Technology, and I was studying advertising and marketing because I thought that was like a safe job, and I was gonna make my mom happy.
Mhm.
But before that, I had gone to a performing arts high school, and I had wanted to be an actress. That didn't work out because of identity, walking
Mhm.
into spaces and like having to go into casting rooms with like white people or white men in particular, and them kind of like policing how Latina are you and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And that took like a big emotional toll on me. So I went to FIT thinking like, okay, let me change it up. Let me do something. Let me change
Yeah.
media from the inside. And I thought maybe working in advertising would do that. No, that's no.
Mhm.
I quickly realized, I was sitting in these classrooms and I was being taught by, once again, white men telling me this is how you advertise to women. This is how you advertise to Latinos. This is how you advertise to Black people. And I was just like, you've got this so wrong. So, I was about to graduate and I was like, damn, yo, I just spent 4 years and money trying to build a career out of a career that is never going to accept me. I'm not going to accept it for how it is. So what do I do?
Mm.
And I was really inspired by people like Francesca Ramsey.
Mm.
If you know, you know. She was, a big figure on YouTube back in the day, making lots of satirical videos about race, about gender, sexuality. And I was like, yes, this makes sense. This mixes both like my theater side
Yeah.
and also all of these inquisitive questions that I had around like identity and identity politics. And yeah, so shout out to Francesca for really leading the way and putting down that foundation. And I kind of followed in her footsteps. And the important thing here too, I didn't mention this, but Francesca's Black, right?
Mhm.
And I think like in many ways, all people, and maybe in particular people of color and like
Right.
Latino folk, we owe a lot to Black folk,
For sure.
right? Like even if we talk about, I know you're Latino as
Yeah.
well, the music that we love, the food that we love, this all has African roots,
Yeah.
So she took a lot of heat, by the way. I don't know if
Mhm.
people know this, but for being a Black woman on the internet back in the day at its peak of YouTube days, talking about race, talking about the intersections of all identities, like, she faced a lot of hate, not
Mm.
critique, hate. And then I come on as a non-Black Latina,
Yeah.
I think she made it a little bit easier for the
Mhm.
rest of us.
For sure, and that's super empowering. And like you said, we should definitely pay that homage and that
Yeah.
appreciation. Education and career is a big topic in a lot of communities as well. And I want to focus on a little bit more on the Latinx and Latinos community and stuff because education and career is something like it's a hard topic to talk about, especially in the household.
Mm.
When you want to make sure that sometimes your parents' sacrifices don't go in vain.
Mm.
And you want to make them proud, like you said, you wanted to make your mother proud going into FIT. I'm curious to know when you were bringing some of these questions up to your parents or some of these career paths up to your parents, what were some of their highlights? Like, what was their reactions like when you were telling them you actually wanted to pursue a career in media, which may seem a little bit outside the norm?
I didn't have these conversations with my
Really?
parents. Yeah, I
Okay.
think so I'm the eldest. I have a younger sister, so I'm the eldest to immigrant parents, and I think that in itself, once again, if you
You're
know, you
good. You're
know,
good.
like I think I was treated like a mini adult at a young
Mm.
age. So this idea that I would turn to my parents for guidance or approval in terms of like career paths, that was not in existence for me,
Mm.
I did after high school, I was getting into casting. So I actually worked as a casting associate, meaning I worked with casting directors,
Mhm.
Prepare for the day in which actors would come in and audition and all this stuff. And that was before going off to college. So I took like some time off and it was going well. Like your girl could have been a full-blown casting director. I enjoyed the job. That was also my first introduction to like even holding a camera because, you know, when you audition, there's like the camera, the tripod and all that stuff. And I had lied to my mom. I told my mom, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to college. Like, yeah, I just have to wait for some paperwork. But in my mind, I was like, this casting thing is about to pop off. You know, my mentor at the time, she really had me under her wing. And in that business, it's about who you know.
Yeah.
So in my head, I was like, I'm going to do this on the low, not have to spend money, get ourselves into debt to go to college. I'm going to basically like finesse the system, even though I know that's like my mom's nightmare. And then, you know, people are mad nosy and chismosa and whatnot. And to make a long story short, somebody told my mom what I was up to, and my mom flipped out. Yo no vine a los Estados Unidos para que no vaya a la universidad. Da, 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 da. And I was like, bro, I had a plan. So, yeah, my dreams of becoming a casting director, it got crushed. And I applied to FIT and went and studied advertising and marketing to make my mom happy. But in a way, it was a blessing, right? Because I'm still in the position that I am here today, creating content, you know, in front and behind the mic. So it all worked out.
And that's what you've been doing, you know, all along. And, you know, and I want to transition a little bit quickly because we talked about media and your work because you've been doing a lot of phenomenal work. You know, on YouTube, which is crazy because Full Circle Moments, when you gravitated towards YouTube, you know, it's something that you've always carried on as well. Would love to learn a little bit more around the cat call, you know, who garnered over like 17 million views across the entire series and stuff. Let's tell the audience a little bit more about your work there and kind of what inspired it.
So I worked for a platform called Me Too. They're like a Latino digital platform where you could go for write-ups, listicles, and also video content. And I was working there as a video producer, and I was creating more like docu profile pieces on people here in New York who I thought I needed to put people on, right? And an important thing for people to keep in mind is that Me Too was, generally speaking, a West Coast platform run by West Coast Latinos, Latinx, and I was maybe one of two people on their team from New York. So I bring that up because a lot of the video content that I was creating kind of disrupted their natural feed. The natural feed that they had was one that was very like comedic and like archetypes maybe that kind of like bring us all together. So things like Vaparu and Abuela and Chancla this and da-da-da, which is all great. Like it's all great for us to feel seen. But the content that I was producing, you know, I didn't do this purposely. It disrupted that. Meaning like I was showcasing my friends who are butch and who are more masculine presenting, or, you know, Afro-Latinos, or, you know, folks with like intersecting identities. And really quickly, I realized in the comment section, you know, the already established audience of Me Too, they weren't having it. You know, we saw a lot of racist, a lot of xenophobic, a lot of homophobic, like all of the isms were in the comments. And, you know, I was told by many people like, oh, don't pay attention to the comments, you know, like keep doing the work that you're doing. And I was like, nah, I actually, like, I am paying attention to the comments because supposedly this platform is made by us, for us. Therefore, the comments that we're getting aren't necessarily from outsiders. They're people like our tios, our tias, you know, our cousins who also internalize anti-Blackness, transphobia, homophobia. And I'm like, I have a sense of responsibility as someone who can create content for this audience, a huge audience. So what I ended up doing was I took those comments and I developed an entire series called The Cat Call, where you know, the saying that I say in the show is like, oh, I'm calling this shit out, you know.
Word.
But really, what I was calling people in. I think there's a difference in calling people out. You know, there's a whole cancel culture and whatnot, and I don't know if it's smart for us to call out members of our family. You know, that almost feels very like prideful and like more about your ego of like, look, I know more than you, and like, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't know this was homophobic or transphobic. So the intention behind the series was for me to really hold the hand of our community through some difficult conversations and, you know, debunk a lot of the misconceptions that we have about one another. And yes, also that outsiders have about us. So we did things like, are you a real Latino if you don't speak Spanish? You know, I know that's very, that's like it's a very common thought. We address things like mental health, you know, that's also common where it's like we dismiss people in our families if they see a therapist or they suffer from depression, you know, and that leads to us not getting the help that we so rightfully deserve. So yeah, 3 seasons, but that was about maybe 3 years ago. But what I love about the internet is that it lives forever. So there's a bunch of people who are benefiting from the series, even if I'm long gone from having created it.
Yeah, you know, and you speak too much, so much about that because I even tuned in to tons of those episodes, and I was able to be informed, you know, be inspired as well because these are topics and misconceptions that you know you want to put out to the light and say, nah, that's actually not true. Let me give you a deeper story as to why that's not that. You know, you do an amazing thing where you play and you wear many hats. You know, you're in front of the camera, but also behind the camera. And you're multi-talented, multifaceted.
It's that Gemini energy.
Listen, that's what it is. But I'm curious to know, has there been moments where you may have been the only one that looks like you in the room? Whether it's the only Latina, whether it's the only woman, like how did you channel through some of those experiences and through those moments?
There's definitely been moments where I was the only woman in a room. When you think about production, it's overwhelmingly male, right? So I remember this one instance where a company was doing a profile piece on me, like one of those like 30 under 30 things.
Nice, yeah.
And it was a great video. You know what video I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Let's not call them out or whatever.
Right.
But so I was getting like an award for the work that I was doing, and as a result, they wanted to do a little profile piece on me, and they were like, listen, we're gonna send a crew, they're gonna film you, and they're gonna like create this little, essentially like a mini doc on you. Sounds cool. Okay. And I remember getting in the space and I realized it's nothing but men. And if I remember correctly, it was like majority white men. And they're asking me all these questions about the work that I do, you know, and the work that I do is so much informed by identity and is so much informed by race and ethnicity and all of that stuff. And I just remember like having to look at a director and his crew and like vehemently be like, yeah, I talk about misogyny in production. You know, I'm like, I'm looking at the faces of exactly what I'm talking about.
Wow.
So it was like, there was a lot of irony in there, you know? But I will say, hearing you say this, ask me this question of, you know, have I ever felt like I was the only one that looked like me in a room? I've worked in a lot of Latino spaces, you know, like Latino platforms and whatnot like that. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge, or maybe for me to acknowledge, that there are plenty of people that look like me when we're talking about, you know, Latino media, Latinx media, media that's constructed in Latin America or serves folks who derive from Latin America. And I say that because most of us don't check that privilege, right? It's the indigenous people from our communities. It's the Black people from our communities who are not represented. We have the Eva Longorias, the Gina Rodriguez's, the Ava Mendez. The list goes on. You know, I personally do not think we need 10 more of me when we are talking about Latino representation. There are other people who get sacrificed as a result. If I were to say, oh yeah, I don't see people like me in the media. Yeah, I do. I do see people like me in the media.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we talked about, you know, when that 30 under 30, when you were getting presented, to the decision makers that are behind the camera, who are calling the calls and who are calling the shots and, you know, making space for some of these roles to be obtained. What would you say to them about the importance of Latinx representation in media or in acting?
Well, one, you need to step aside, assuming that I'm talking to someone who isn't, you know, Latino, Latinx. Like, you need to step aside. You know, the foundation of your company or your platform needs to reflect the population, and we are a big part of that population. But also acknowledging that I've worked for companies, like I said, that were run by folks from Latin America who wanted to provide content to Latinos here in the US. And they also were very ignorant as to the diversity of us, right? I think media and our government have done a fabulous job at making us out to be a monolithic group, right? And also, we are not a race, but we're racialized. What I mean by that is we're not a race in that you can be indigenous, you can be Asian Latino, as the ex-former president of Peru, Fujimori. You can be a white Latino or Latina like Cristina, who didn't watch Cristina as a kid, right? Or you can be a black Latino or Latina, right? Like Amara La Negra, let's say. So we're not a race, but, and I'll speak only for, in the context of the US, we've been racialized. What I mean by that is, when you think of a Latina, Latino, Latinx, you think of someone like me. You think of someone like yourself. You know, basically we're talking about mestizo, you know, a dash of brown, you know, a little brown, a little white in there, a little mix it up. And examples of that is casting, right? We're looking for a Latina, 20 years old to 30. You expect for people like me to walk in the room. Right?
Right.
But if someone like Amara La Negra were to come in the room, they'd be like, ma'am, excuse me, this was for a Latina role. And be like, she's Dominican. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it takes a lot of unlearning for the people who are behind the scenes. And that includes us. Because we also harbor a lot of this miseducation about ourselves. And it takes a lot of stepping away, you know, passing the mic to someone else.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I think education is important, especially having those conversations with your parents to learn a little bit more of like culture, identity. What were some of their struggles kind of coming into the US and everything, because sometimes we inherit some of those struggles to learn a little bit more. Kat, you also do this amazing thing where creating space for yourself is very important, right? And I say that because you create space online with your followers, creating space with, you know, different polls, different surveys, right? Self-affirmation things, right? But also saying no to certain opportunities, right? I want to dig in a little bit deeper into that. There's so much value into saying no, right? I'm curious to know, where have you said no to certain opportunities just for your own mental health, your own mental sanity? Like, tell us a little bit more about those moments.
Well, first off, I'll say I've definitely said no to many opportunities where I think, once again, due to the ignorance about the diversity of our community, you know, they're like, oh yeah, you can speak about this because you speak to all Latinos. And I'm like, nope, I won't be that token Latina, especially if it's something that's going to be paid. You know, I'm very conscious of that. I think that there are other people who are marginalized within our communities that could be folks who are Black, folks who are Indigenous, folks who are disabled, physically disabled, then I'm like, I think I'm going to pass this on to someone else. And I think this goes back to the idea of like not always calling people out, but calling them in, because if somebody has already reached out to me with an opportunity, that means they're more susceptible to what I have to say, right? They're like,
Yeah.
Kat, oh my God, we love your work. We want you to come and speak at this university, da 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 da. So they already have like a liking to me.
Yep.
And I'm not going to be like, how dare you reach out to me and not reach out? You didn't think about it being Black History Month, you know, like something like that.
Right.
So I take those opportunities to, you know, put other people on. I think it's really important to acknowledge, like, I don't need all the limelight all the time. I think that also comes from like lessons we get from capitalism.
Yeah.
Like, more is better. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I don't need more followers, and I also don't even need more money, you know? Like, I'm also in a position of privilege, reassessing, like, I'm not where I was 5 years ago. I'm not where I was 10 years ago. So let me try to make sure that I'm kind of spreading this around.
I love that, Kat. And you talked about a few things there, because I think it's important for us to acknowledge that sometimes certain opportunities are given to us, but it necessarily doesn't align with us and our values, that doesn't mean it won't necessarily align with somebody else. And I'm always in the mindset of paying it forward and giving back. So I usually take certain things on. I'm like, okay, I'll learn a little bit more about it. In case it doesn't align with me, it might align with somebody else. And for sure, I'm always keeping people in mind, because you just never know what that one opportunity could do for somebody else. And I've always had that mindset of, you know what, you got to pay it forward, you know? Kat, we talked about community and creating space for oneself. I'm curious to know, why is that so important for you? Like, when you're on social media, you have these spaces where, you know, self-affirmations are a thing, surveys are a thing, polls are a thing for you. Why is that so important for you?
Temperature checks. Like, I want to know how people are thinking, where they're coming from. Like, it also will keep me in check. You know, like,
I love that.
Just because I think one way about something doesn't mean that I'm right. You know, I want to know where people are coming from. I also think that in turn makes me a better content creator, a better artist, to better serve my community. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm like not really on IG too hard the way I used to be, but when I was, you're right, I used to utilize surveys and polls and all of that stuff. I think it's important for us to not feel like we're siloed. The internet's an interesting place because you can feel connected, but also feel so damn lonely at the same time. So it's also like putting a mirror up to community to be like, yo, you're not the only one. Like, just as an example, I think I must have done something around like orgasms.
I think I've seen it. Yeah.
There's something called like an orgasm gap, which is like an overwhelming amount of cis straight women are the ones that orgasm the least. You know, and I forget what the poll was, but it was kind of to show a mirror to my audience of like, yo, if you answered that you're cis, you're straight, and you're really not getting your orgasms off, look, you're not alone. You know, like 90% of the people answered that they're in the same boat, you know, and then let's like work this through as to why that is. And the answer is men think that their dick is magic. But anyways.
Got it. You know, but I think having that community, you know, and creating a space that you said, like, you're not alone, that's very important. Why is it so important for people to speak their truth, embrace their identity and their culture?
Well, for a long time, due to the gatekeepers, due to, you know, the way media has been held, and to a certain degree still is, our voices haven't been amplified. We've always had opinions. A pet peeve of mine is when people say, oh, the voiceless. Nobody is voiceless. It's that not everyone is given the privilege of a mic. But as a result of the internet, of social media, things like Twitter, it has democratized the value of an opinion, right? Whereas, let's say, a film comes out and they're like, oh my God, everyone has an opinion. Like, oh my God, everybody has an opinion about the film, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, everyone has always had an opinion about the film. It's just that the film critics, who have been overwhelmingly men, overwhelmingly white, their opinions have been the ones that we have been valuing. And now, as a result of social media, it's like, yes, let's create the hashtags. Let's amplify what we've always been thinking. Let's have these discussions.
Absolutely. It's so powerful because social media does a lot, to be able to spread that word and get it out there. Kat, I'm curious to know in the last couple of questions here, what are some of the things that contribute to your success that we don't see that had happened in your career?
Hmm. Therapy?
Mm.
Definitely therapy. Which I'm pretty open about. I'm definitely not one who carries any shame around therapy, but maybe what people don't see is me, like, in bouts of depression, trying to figure out how to get out of it, struggling with the responsibility. I feel a large sense of responsibility to community, because well, if we talk about Latinos here in the US, we're so divided.
Mhm.
And I see in the ways in which we hurt one another, and I sympathize. So I don't know if everybody knows how, maybe they do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if people know how deeply I love our community, and that's why I do what I do. So investing in that means investing in therapy.
I love that. And thank you for being honest there because, we see the work that you're doing. And, that's why I want to take the moment out right now to give you your flowers, to really appreciate everything that you want and that you do for our community in many instances, because it's important, for you to really create space for a community to be able to voice their opinion. And I think the important thing that you mentioned is that to ensure that we're not alone. And that goes for all communities, right? Just being able to have an outlet to say, hey, listen, you're not alone. We're here with you and let's talk about it a little bit. So I just definitely wanted to give you your flowers for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so
Anytime.
much. And I don't sit down with a lot of men, so
Yeah.
consider yourself, very unique.
I appreciate that. Definitely. And then on the flip side, we always turn it back to the guest.
Oh,
Who would you give your flowers to?
oh wow. Way to put me like anybody in the world.
Anybody in the world, whoever comes to mind.
You know what? I'm gonna give my sister flowers.
Mm.
She's my younger sister, and there are many things that I have learned from her. And most recently, I've been very in awe of her growth. I I think often I'm seen as the one who has a lot of personal insight, development of self and all of this stuff. But my sister has really astonished me in the ways in which she is prioritizing her own joy, prioritizing her own mental health in ways where I'm like, oh, damn, I got to do better.
Mm. Feel that. I love that too. Kat, you are amazing. Thank you for sharing. We do have another segment onto the show before we kind of
Dun,
head
dun,
out. This is the
dun.
Call the Hidden Gems. It's a variety of questions here. What I would want you to do is just pick one question, read it out loud, and whatever comes off the cuff. Let me shake it around so we
Okay.
kind of mix the bag a little bit. Get in there.
Oh, this is deep.
Just one question, and let's hear it.
How much time do you make for yourself every day? Drag me. I don't make a lot of time for myself, and that's something that I'm working on. And I'm also trying to figure out what making time for myself looks like in a way that isn't fundamentally rooted in capitalism, where it's like, treat yourself to the coffee, girl. And it's like, that's cute, but how am I going to take time for myself in a way that doesn't have to do with me like consuming things? Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, Kat. You know, you are amazing. I felt the energy the entire time. It's great to have you in person. You know what I'm saying? We usually hear you on the mic, you know, on Spotify every morning and stuff, but it's good to have you in person. Just feel the energy. There's nothing better.
Oh,
You know what I'm
thank
saying?
you.
So, Kat, let the people know where they can follow you and how do we best support you moving forward.
You can follow me on Instagram, all socials. It's Cat Lazo. Made it very simple, you know, and Lazo is with a Z, just an FYI.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm heavy in the DMs. I'll answer back if I see you. Just don't email me. I know
Okay.
you emailed me
Yeah.
like
I mean,
a
that mistake,
gazillion
right?
years ago.
Right.
But hey,
We made it
it
happen.
worked out.
For
We're
sure.
here.
Made it happen and stuff. But Kat, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on today and wish you ongoing success.
Thank you.
And there you have it. That was Off the Cuff with Kat Lazo.